Hey, everybody. So I would like to announce that that's the entirety of the content. So we can all go home now, so thank you. I'm just kidding. Thank you. So DrupalCon. It's the second to last session of the very last day. So hopefully y'all can keep some enthusiasm because there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff going on. And I'm gonna talk about that just a little bit. So for those of you that I have not met, my name is Herchel. I've been involved with Drupal for a very long time, for over 18 years, which kind of breaks my mind. It makes me feel very old. I'm the primary developer lead behind Drupal's default theme called Olivero. I'm also a subsystem maintainer for Drupal core's CSS. I do a lot of contribution, try to get a lot of things into Drupal core. I've helped a lot with single directory components, various different Twig filters, and a whole bunch of really cool stuff. I have a teenager, 2 dogs. I'm a front-end developer. I'm a fan of fast, accessible websites. And I'm a founder for a new company called DripYard. DripYard is selling premium Drupal themes. You can find out more at dripyard.com. All the stuff I'm talking about, if you don't want to implement it yourself, you can buy one. So today we are going to talk about the past and how we got to where we currently are, where we have this component-driven Drupal themes. And then we're going to talk about the future, including Drupal Canvas, AI, and just the open web in general, and how to write components right now that are going to work in the future with things like Drupal Canvas. Before we get going, who here is a front-end developer? Any back-end developers? Anyone here just like hanging out? Yeah. So I'm a big believer in taking home something practical, and I have this one tip for all the front-end developers. Has nothing to do with everything else, but you know, like in order to be able to see your changes in your Twig files while you are doing development, previously you had to go through and you had to edit your services.yaml file. You had to edit your settings.php. It was a complete pain in the butt. There's a new UI for it, but something that's brand new is there is a drush command. And so this drush theme dev on will disable aggregation, turn on Twig debugging, disable your caches, and it's just one of those things that saves you, minutes a day, adds up, makes your life a little bit better. So hopefully y'all can use that. Thank you. You can thank Moshe, the drush guy who's around here somewhere. I don't know if he's in this room. So let's talk about how we got to where we are. Who here has worked with Drupal 5? That's more than expected. So obviously Drupal 6 and Drupal 7, hopefully everybody, maybe? So back in the ye olden days of Drupal 5, 6, and 7, we had to write PHP in our templates. We used PHP template. We would typically generate these monolith CSS files we would have like, I don't know, a whole bunch of Sass partials that would generate just one big file. We would load that. We used a lot of jQuery because we still had to support Internet Explorer. But we did have a very robust templating system that you could do almost everything with, even though it was very verbose with all the wrapper divs. In Drupal 8, we introduced Twig templating languages. The Twig templating language, which is amazing, especially compared to PHP template. The library's API, but we still kind of worked with large CSS files, and we started phasing out jQuery. Drupal 9 included the Olivero and Claro themes, which didn't really affect how we worked. But with Drupal 9.5, we got a revamped dump function, which uses Symfony var dumper, where prior to that, your Drupal site would run out of memory if you tried to dump anything that was a complex data structure. Which brings us to where we currently are. So right now we have, I'm going to go, I'm going to go over these kind of individually, but we're going to talk about template discovery, the icon API, Twig filters, and then finally we're going to go into single directory components before we get into the feature. So who here has seen this form? It does very similar things to what that drush command does, but this is something that makes front-end development much easier. Matt Glaman, who, raise your hand, Matt, did the majority of the work on that. Thank you, Matt. Has anyone here used the icon API with Drupal core? So Drupal 11.1 includes a new icon API. And this icon API allows you to include an icon through either PHP or directly through Twig. And you do that by adding like a theme.icons.yaml file into either your theme or your module. And you can dump a whole boatload of icons in a directory, and it will look at each one and bring those in. There's a whole bunch to talk about with the icons API, but the most important thing that you need to take home is that the documentation is excellent. And I'm not going to go deep into this because it requires its own session. But if you're not familiar with the icon API, go to the documentation. It's free, Drupal 11.1 and later. But if you are still on Drupal 10, you can download the UI icons module, and there's a submodule in there, a backport module, that does the exact same thing. The UI icons module is also awesome because it has a little, it has some additional functionality, like a little field, like a field widget that allows you to choose icon, like an icon chooser, and you can either do autocomplete or grid. Drupal 10, the later versions of Drupal 10 include a couple new Twig filters. My favorite one is add suggestion. Add suggestion allows you to add a template suggestion, and that doesn't seem super cool, but it becomes really powerful, and you're going to see in the future, like in some slides on how I kind of use this. But an example of this is having a field in this example, it's snow -- article, and setting your field to be an unordered list. And then you would have, what that tells Drupal to do is it tells it to look for a field -- unordered list.html.twig. Within that, you can place your markup for your unordered list or whatever you want. And at that point, it'll pick it up and it'll just work. You can also, there's also some Twig filters to add CSS classes and add attributes. And of course, you can chain these together, and that makes it fairly powerful to be able to reduce the number of templates that you have and kind of still make your markup BEM friendly, not have a whole bunch of CSS nesting to have a proper CSS architecture. But at the same way, we're still, like at the core, we still have like a crap ton of templates. It's template on template on template and on template, and that's, it's powerful, but it's confusing, and there's kind of a lot going on. So this comes into single directory components. And this is a horrible Photoshop of my friend Matteo, who is the primary architect of single directory components. He's not in Vienna today, but he should be. So who here has worked with single directory components? So I'm seeing maybe about half of the room, which is phenomenal. Single directory components make Drupal's front end a lot more modern, a lot easier to understand, and it's just amazing. So at its core, you have, within either a theme or a module, you have a components directory, and within the components directory, you have a directory for a component. An example of that might be a card, accordion item, or something like that. Within a component, there's two required files. One is a component.yaml file and the other is a Twig file. So within your component.yaml file, you can define the data that the Twig file accepts. And this is pretty powerful because it allows Drupal and modules such as Canvas to automatically generate a form where you can pull in this data. So in this particular case, this is a component.yaml file, and this is the Twig file that takes that data and outputs it. This looks pretty complicated, but there's documentation that you can copy and paste. I think there's probably a drush command somewhere that could automatically create that for you. If you have a CSS file or a JavaScript file within a template, Drupal will automatically load that whenever that component is being created. And this is pretty powerful because you don't have to go into your libraries.yaml file, point to where your CSS is, point to where your JavaScript is. You don't have to do your attached library functions to make sure it's loaded. It just works. And the cool thing about single directory components is everything is just in this one directory where you don't have to jump around between a CSS, a JavaScript, a template file, etc. So if you haven't used that yet, there's tons of content online, some videos. There's websites such as like Drupal TV or previous DrupalCons that you can look at sessions specifically on single directory components. In current Drupal, and I say current Drupal, I'm talking about like pre-Drupal Canvas. When you want to use a single directory component, you typically go into your template.html.twig. This might be like paragraph -- whatever .html.twig, and you do a Twig include or an embed, and you pass your data as props or slots to the template. Then whenever that paragraph template or node template or whatever is being called, it will load up the single directory component. Everything's happy. And this is really, really powerful because it allows you to, a theme can now ship some base styles and a library of components, and then no matter what your data architecture, whether it's paragraphs, whether it's some type of entity references, whether it's nodes, whether it's layout builder, it can all work with the same components. And that's like pretty awesome. So is this as good as it gets? You know, and the answer of course is no. You've all probably seen Dries' Dries note and those videos, those sexy videos of like dragging everything around and moving, and you're thinking, now that's the future that I want. So I have a whole bunch, like over the past month or two, I have been following Drupal Canvas really, really closely. I've been adapting our themes to work with Drupal Canvas. I've been filing a whole bunch of bugs against Drupal Canvas as I find those. And I have like a lot of pretty good tips on how to write components now that will work with what you have, and it'll also continue to work with Drupal Canvas. So the disclaimer on this is best practices are evolving, and Drupal Canvas is changing really fast. Even though we're still in a release candidate status, it's changing. There's new things happening, there's new features. So all this information is kind of relevant right now, but it might change 6 months or a year from now. But you know, at that point, we'll have more DrupalCons to learn from people. So a couple challenges that we ran into is how can we use the same component with and without Canvas? If I have an image, if I have a component like a card or a hero, and it has an image, how can I use those in both places? How do I tell Drupal Canvas to load, you know, if I have a string of data, how do I tell it if I want like a single row text input, or if I want a multi-row multi-row text area, or if I want to load something like CK Editor. So let's kind of get into it. The first thing that's important to remember is, so within single directory components, you can set different props to be required. If you do that within Drupal Canvas, you have to give it some example data, because as Canvas tries to initially render that component, it sees that, hey, something's required, I need to throw something in there. And that is done through the examples key that you kind of see at the bottom right here. If you don't have that examples key in there and your theme is, if you don't have that examples key in there, but your prop is required, your component will show up on this component status disabled components list right here. So as you're doing theme development, this is going to be one of your best friends right here. So if you go under admin appearance, you'll see a components tab at the very top, and then there's that secondary tab where it says disable components. You can look through this list of components and you can see your components in there and why they are not loaded. And that kind of gives you a lot of information on how to troubleshoot. You can then potentially fix it yourself, or just pop into the components channel in Drupal Slack, or the Drupal Canvas channel in Drupal Slack, and kind of be off to the races. So let's talk about working with text. The most simple way to work with text is just by putting type string and maybe throw an example down there. And what that'll do is that will load a text input, like your most basic text input that you have. That's suitable for things like titles and stuff like that. But what if you want to load CK Editor? So CK Editor, you have to use two different keys right there: content media type, X formatting context. So Drupal Canvas will see those keys and it will load up CK Editor. Drupal Canvas will create two text formats within your text format area within your admin, and you can't edit those, but you can kind of go into config and see what they have. There's two of them. There's one for block and one for inline. As far as I know, the inline one, well, let me back up a little bit. So the Drupal Canvas block HTML allows block type HTML tags. Things like the paragraph tag, ordered lists, unordered lists, list items, and things like that. The inline HTML accepts inline elements such as links, emphasis, and stuff like that. The inline does not currently work with Canvas as far as I know because of some type of CK Editor limitation. So that is why we just set it to block right here. When you output your text, if you were going to do this today, and you don't have this raw filter within your SDC, it would be double escaped, which is a bug, and you can see the link to that down there. There's a lot of activity on this issue, and it's likely going to be fixed pretty soon. So if you're going to go home and experiment tonight with current Drupal Canvas and then you try to output your text, you will see that HTML double escaped. You don't want it double escaped, you add that raw in there, but just keep in mind that you need to take that raw out as that issue gets fixed, which hopefully will be within a week or two. Sometimes you want to load a text area, but you do not want to load CK Editor. An example of this is maybe you have like a testimonial component, and you don't want your content editors to be able to inject things like hyperlinks or bold text or anything like that in there. So in that particular case, you add a pattern key, and I know this is kind of a pain in the butt right here, but you see that regex there. That will tell Drupal Canvas to load a text area as opposed to a normal text input. So One of the more complicated things that I have been trying to do is trying to come up with ways where I can load an image with normal Drupal, and I can load that image with Drupal Canvas. I want one unified component right here. It's a little bit difficult because Drupal Canvas will give you data similar to that top pane right there, where you have an object with width and height and alt text and maybe an image source in there. Drupal, of course, just gives you kind of a mess of markup with an image tag somewhere in there, right? And so how can you have a component accept both? So a thing to note is that Drupal Canvas now includes its own image component. And the image component does a lot of really cool things. One of the main things that's really neat is it automatically, Drupal Canvas's image component, when it's in use, it will automatically generate responsive images. And you can kind of see the output of that right here. There's a whole bunch going on in here, but it uses source set to do it. And one note on this is that with Drupal Canvas currently, you cannot change like the aspect ratio of the image. You know, like say you have a card and you want to do a scale and crop, you cannot do that with an image style within the Drupal Canvas image style. But you can still do this with CSS. So this is still pretty powerful. The Drupal Canvas will ship with its own image style called Drupal Canvas parameterized with. And there's a hidden effect in here where it grabs the width and the height and automatically generates the multiple styles. But you can also add on additional things. You can see right now by default it converts it to WebP. When Drupal Canvas starts requiring Drupal 11.2, it'll convert it to AVIF at that point. Because there's two different data structures depending on where you're coming from, you have to kind of do a little bit of complicated things here. So the first thing we do is we check to see if image.source exists, and if we are passing in any type of width, like if we want to resize that. And a particular use case of this is if I have a hero component, I want that image to be really, really wide and really large. You know, I might want a 2,000 pixel hero component, but if I have that image showing up in a card, I might only want it to be 400 pixels or 600 pixels or something like that. So in this particular case, we check to see if it's coming from Canvas. If it is coming from Canvas, we check to see if there's a width prop being passed in. If there's a width prop being passed in, at that point, we have to maintain the same aspect ratio. So we know the image is going to be resized, but we have to calculate that height width also. And at that point, we pass that into Canvas's image component. And the reason why it's important to calculate that height based on the width is so the aspect ratio doesn't change. When browsers pull down your HTML, before the image loads, it will actually look at the width and the height of the image and reserve space for that. And that kind of removes your content from jumping around, any type of layout shifts. So we want to make sure we get that right. So things can get a bit more complicated right here. And so in this particular case, this is a combined template called image or media. And what that means is it can take data from either, it can take data from Canvas, or it can take data from standard Drupal. It can take data from media. It can take almost any type of image that you throw at it. And you can also pass in additional information, like things like if you want to set the fetch priority attribute or loading attributes and things like that. It's best practices if you have an image that's loaded like above the fold, things like heroes and stuff like that, you typically want to set your loading to be eager. And you might want to set your fetch priority to be high, and that will tell the browser to immediately download that, immediately render it, and that'll improve a lot of your performance metrics like, yeah, like the initial load, like the term's escaping me right now. So you can override all the stuff with this image component. I'm going to give you some more like a link to the code samples in a second. When you would use this image, we use this image component from other components. The image component isn't meant to be used directly in Canvas. We have a separate one for that. And you use it like this. So this particular example right here might be used in a hero. We load the image, we override the width, so it's only 600 pixels. We set the fetch priority to high, the loading to eager, and at that point, it just kind of works. You might have noticed at the bottom of this component right here, we're using that whole add suggestion twig filter, and we pass in bear. And what that does is that tells Drupal to look for field -- bear, which then would potentially load media -- bear. And what that is that will load the images without all the markup that you don't want. You know, I don't know if you all have seen like the media templates and the field templates. There can be like, I don't know, 16 levels of divs and things like that in there, which can, you know, kind of muck up your markup, slow down your website and things like that. Something else that I do in this component is we set no UI to true. This is a new key value that you can add into your SDC, and this tells any type of page builder similar to Canvas or display builder to not show this component in their list of components, because this is only meant to be used by other components. So in this particular case, that is used by other components, but this component, right, we have to create a new component specifically for Canvas. And this is the one that users will interact with. So we create one called image, or Canvas image. And at that point, we can add additional props, like what if they want to hyperlink it? What if they want to set a border radius and things like that? We pass all that in to the previous component, that image or media component, which then does the heavy lifting. Everything kind of works pretty well. That's like a whole bunch of stuff. But we wrote an article, so you all are encouraged to check this out. It goes to the URL at the bottom. While you're there, feel free to check out themes. But it's really good information. It's kind of a learning process to go through this, because there's still a good amount of stuff that we're going through with Canvas, and Canvas is changing pretty fast. So a couple things that Canvas cannot do as you're creating your components. You cannot pass through, Canvas cannot generate an array of composite fields. Like if you want to have a button list components, this will not work currently in Drupal Canvas. There are issues for them to do it, but it is a fairly complicated process, and so just be aware of that. Currently with Canvas, you have to do something like this, and it's a little less elegant. It's not ideal, but this will work today with Drupal Canvas. Something else that's super, it's not really supported by Canvas, but it's important, is detecting it, letting the component know if you're within the Canvas editor. And this could be useful, like if you have an accordion item and you need to drag components into your accordion slot area, you want to tell that accordion to open up if you're in the editor. And so currently, the only robust way that I found to do it is by looking for the route, to see if the route starts with Canvas. If the route starts with Canvas, at that point, we know that we're in the Canvas editor. There's still the matter of detecting if you're in Canvas preview. That has to be done with JavaScript. I don't have a code sample here, but it's fairly straightforward because the URL changes, and you can use JavaScript to keep an eye on that. If you create this isCanvas variable, you can then, of course, you can add that to your HTML, your body tag in your HTML, and that'll look something just like this, which is fairly straightforward if you're familiar with Drupal Twig. Something that I discovered yesterday with Drupal Canvas is, so let me back up a second here. If you are in the Drupal Canvas editor and something isn't rendering quite the way you expect in the editor, but it is rendering when you're on your normal page, you want to go in and you want to kind of inspect that. You want to see what's happening. If you go and you start inspecting the markup within the Drupal Canvas editor, you're going to see there's this transparent overlay that has like all the little blocks for the slots and things like that over. And then behind that, there is an iframe that has your rendered web page. The iframe has a CSS rule called pointer events none. And that pointer events none prevents you from kind of inspecting it like with Chrome developer tools or Firefox or whatever you're using. And that's kind of a pain in the butt. You can go in and you can find that. You can find the iframe and remove that pointer events and hide the other stuff. But there is a secret where if you hold down the V button on your keyboard and then you open up developer tools, it will hide the overlay and remove those pointer event rules. This is in a comment on one of the Drupal Canvas issues, and it was added in there by Jesse Baker, who I don't know if he's here in Vienna, but if he is, this is like a super useful thing. It's not documented, and I don't know if it's going to stay in there, but it's one of those nice little developer experience tools that allows you as a front-end developer to debug your components. So show of hands here, who is sick of everything artificial intelligence at DrupalCon? Yeah, like everything seems to be AI, and you're like, heck, where do we fit in for that, So I've done of course I've done a lot of experimenting with AI. I'm like, can AI generate my components for me? So, so I was playing with this, this is maybe a couple months ago, I was playing with this service called Bolt. I think it was bolt.new or something like that. And I told it to generate a Miami Vice theme accordion. And it gave it to me. And it looked like that, and I'm like, that's what I asked for. It's maybe not the best. It gave me a bunch of React code. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe rewrite this with vanilla JavaScript and vanilla CSS and vanilla markup. And it gave me this right here, which is basically like a bunch of divs wrapped in some JavaScript that it writes onto the page. Which, if you're a front-end developer, you're like, this is not ideal. It's not very, it's not accessible at all. It wouldn't be keyboard focusable. But what's really interesting is the fact that it did it. The fact that at least if you're using your mouse, it kind of works. I don't think AI is going to get worse. It's going to, it'll likely get better. I feel that one of the reasons why y'all have probably seen Canvas with their code components, and AI can generate those code components. AI is, I think, fairly better at React than anything else because there's a lot of examples on GitHub that it scrapes. But how does that fit into your themes? You all have maybe seen this slide from the Dries note, and the Canvas, I believe it's the Canvas AI module, has some type of orchestration agent that can look at your components and kind of fit them all onto a page and maybe do a lot of the initial work where you can go and edit afterwards, you know, so you can put the hero on the top, some cards underneath. But the question is, how does AI know about your components? You know, so you can add metadata to your component. You can use the description tag. Your description tag will be read by AI, so you can tell, in this particular case, I'm telling AI all about this card component. You know, this card component's a little bit more complicated because if it's wider than 600 pixels, it will go into landscape mode. If it's narrower, it'll go into portrait mode. And this lets AI know this, which is very relevant information. You can also tell things like, you can tell some other valid use cases for this is you can set descriptions on your props in your slots. So an example of this on your, like if you have a component called accordion group and you have a slot in there, currently there's no way to limit that slot to accordion item components, but you can add a description in there for AI, so at least AI knows what to do. And you can tell AI, hey, this slot is only for accordion item components, and then, you know, hopefully AI will behave and do what we want. You can override that on a site-by-site basis within configuration. So in this particular case, you can go under, you can see the URL at the bottom if you have the Canvas AI module installed, and you can go into your components. You can say, hey, this is really useful for, you know, my particular use case. Like, for example, if I have a travel website, I can say, this is really useful for this type of travel package. You know, you can add descriptions for, you can get very granular. You can add descriptions for props, for slots, and everything like that. So this, I have a good amount of time for questions. So if y'all have questions, please raise your hand and we'll go from there. So thank you, and any questions? Thank you. All right, I'm gonna pick on someone even if you don't have your hand. Over there in the black shirt, what's your question? I know, yeah, that was on purpose. Everybody's kind of wearing black shirts. All right, over here, Christina. The question is, what's the most difficult component to integrate in with Canvas? And that by far is images. So there's like obviously like there's two different data structures that you're getting, you know, between standard Drupal and Canvas. So that's why we have those if statements. For Canvas to load the image widget, you need to have a $ref attribute in there, and if Drupal sees that $ref attribute but Canvas does not exist, it can error out if you have schema validation turned on. And yeah. Other questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Here, one, yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Quick question, just to touch upon the points like you said before around the image styles and retaining aspect ratio on images and setting aspect ratio. When do you think that will actually become more of a focus as part of this project? So in my world, I work with TV websites, and we regularly have to have 16:9 specific widescreen aspect ratio images.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a couple ways you can work around that, and I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm not on the Canvas team. Like, as I was talking to the Canvas team, this might have been either Christian or Ballant, they want to make it work with things like focal point and external stuff, but right now we're just trying to get it stable. So I don't have a timeline on that. If I am in your particular situation, the way I would handle that, like I don't know how familiar you are with CSS, but within CSS there's the object fit property where you can kind of like crop things and have it not scale. And then there's another property for that called object position, where you can kind of set it to go to the top, to the left. What I would end up doing is I would write an image component where I can pass in the object position as props. And if you do that, it'll be almost as good as using an image component. Does that make sense? You're welcome. Go ahead.
You mentioned in Twig we add suggestion. Does it replace the hook theme suggestions that we used to do in order to add suggestions to the theme or to the, it can be in the field level or page level, whatever it was?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing, but of course, when you get into PHP, you can make you can do more complicated things with PHP, but it basically does the exact same thing with that. So I don't want to say it replaces it, but it's kind of another way to do something very similar to augment it. So sometimes it's nice not to have to write PHP. One second.
Yeah.
So I guess you said like the future of Drupal theming, you see it as Drupal Canvas. Yes or no?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So it's funny, John Albin is doing a presentation at the exact same time as this, and we both have the future of Drupal theming in our title. So I was joking with him is that we are going to split time and space and go off on two Drupals, two universes, and I don't know if we're in a good or evil one. So right now, I would say yes, because so the question is the future of Drupal theming Canvas? I would say yes. Like Canvas is being heavily integrated into Drupal CMS. There has been talk about potentially pulling it into Drupal core. I think if something like that happens, it's years away. There's been talk about like Canvas is introducing functionality to replace the block UI, replace things like view modes and stuff like that. For all of us, probably everyone in this room has used the block UI and know how it was pretty awesome back in 2005, but that was a while ago. But that being said, a lot of it depends on, of course, continued funding from Acquia and the success of Acquia Source and everything like that. But the people who are working on Drupal Canvas are probably some of the smartest people in the ecosystem, and so I'm fairly confident with it.
Quick follow-up, Canvas on full stack Drupal sites for the future, Canvas on full stack Drupal sites or decoupled sites? What do you see as the future?
I mean, I am on team full stack because I really like server-side rendering, Anytime I can eliminate JavaScript and have HTML and CSS, I think that's a win for the browser. It makes for quicker websites. I mean, what it comes down to comes down to your teams. There's so many people out there that don't want to learn Drupal, but just know React. And the cool thing about the Canvas code components, it gets them up working with that immediately. Anything else? All right, one more.
I appreciate you're not on the Canvas team, but in your view of a typical website with different content types, what bits of that website would be Canvas?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is going to change. So so Canvas still has a number of bugs, right? So does Drupal. Right now, when I'm doing my themes, I hard code the header and footer into the page.html.twigs, and then and that loads, a single directory component, and I pass in some theme regions. And that works really well because I do a lot of different template suggestions. Like for example, if I want to have the primary menu in the header, I want it to look one way, but I might want the primary menu to be on some pages and be in more vertical mode, and I might want that primary menu to be in a footer and be kind of expanded. Right now, you can't do that with Drupal Canvas because of an outstanding bug. That being said, that bug will get fixed. When that bug gets fixed and several other similar things, websites will, I believe they'll slowly be taken over by Canvas. As it stands right now, I would build my landing pages with Drupal Canvas. I would experiment with doing the node templates with Drupal Canvas. I haven't done that yet. I've seen demos and stuff, and it looks really awesome. I can tell you right now, if you have a view and you want to load your data with components, you still have to go to view mode route. You still have to create your node view mode.html.twig and do an include and stuff like that. I think we're in kind of a transitory period right now where things are kind of slowly moving toward that. But Drupal also takes backwards compatibility really seriously, so you don't have to go this Canvas route if you don't want to. Does that answer your question? Yeah, we still got structured content in some places, and then, yeah, right now it's a little bit everywhere. I would do landing pages are great with Canvas. Structured data, at this point, I would probably do it old school Drupal style, but like including single directory components. But that's going to be, if you ask me in maybe 6 months to a year, that'll hopefully change. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody.